Welcome Orem GIS users, and today I'm going to present how to migrate data to the Knight geodatabase. Well, first I need to talk about the geodatabase that we currently use a lot called Soldier. I'm going to go ahead and connect here to Soldier by double-clicking it, and I can see lots of data sets, but I'm going to go into its properties and show you some stuff. This geodatabase is at version 10.2.1, which is fine. This older version means that my older GIS software that I personally wrote can access the data on this server. But I'm going to encourage everybody to migrate to the new geodatabase, which is called Knight, and it is currently at version 10.4, but as more users upgrade their client machines, then I want to move it to version 10.6. So the first thing that you need to do to connect to Knight in the first place is a username and password. With Soldier we connected two ways. We could either connect as ourselves, so in this case I'm connecting as Orem/Roger3338, or we could connect as GIS Reader, which had generic read-only access to a lot of data sets. We want to move away from Soldier because the data sets are tied to the username that created them. Take me, for example, with this waste management data set here in the middle. If I were to leave the city, the only person that could modify stuff that I created would be somebody that's got my username and password. Although it's true that somebody can manage the data itself, like adding new records and deleting features and so forth, no one would be able to add fields or grant permissions to other people unless they're imitating me. So that's one of the things we want to get away from. So in order to get a username and password, send me the username and password you want to use. I will use an uppercase username, and the password should be mixed case and should contain, a few numbers, punctuation marks, and stuff like that. So I'm going to add a new database connection to Soldier using a username called SEM, which stands for cemetery. So I'm going to put in the password here. Now, this may not all be filled out for you, so let me just go over the properties. You do want SQL Server as your database platform, and the instance is Orem-SQL/OremSQL, all capital letters. We're going to be using database authentication, not operating system authentication. I'm going to put in the password. I want to save the username and password, and the database that I want is Orem EGDB. Now if you click on this down arrow and you get an error, and maybe it takes a long time to generate that error, there's two possibilities for that. The first is that you could have the wrong username and or password in here. The second problem that it could be is that maybe you don't have the database driver for SQL Server 2012. So let me show you where that database driver is. It's out on the network. It's on PW4 server. If you work in public works, PW4 server is probably your F drive, but if you don't, then here's how to access it. So //, and remember that backslash is leaned to the left, PW4 server /sys for system, /dataproc, short for data processing, /apps, short for applications, /arcgis. So press enter and you'll be led to this folder. The bottom folder here is called Soldier and Knight Driver. So I'm going to double click that, and there's a few installations in here. The one that I want you to run is this long-winded one called Microsoft SQL Server 2012 SP3, stands for Service Pack, Native Client, etc., etc. You do not want to do this while ArcCatalog or ArcGIS Desktop are open because they need to see the driver. So close ArcCatalog, install the driver, and reopen it to connect to Knight. Okay, with all the properties filled out and the driver installed, I can click OK. And you'll see up here that ArcCatalog immediately puts me into rename mode because it has a blue selection box and a black rectangle around it. Now, I don't want to call the connection just Knight, and I'll tell you why. There are several people, many of you, who will connect to night with different usernames. And you want to be able to see the different connections based on the username that is connecting, because each one will have different permissions. So separate night with an underscore, followed by the username in all capital letters. Now if you don't do this, that's fine. Arc Catalog's not going to complain, but it may be difficult to follow further videos or training if this syntax isn't used. Okay, so I've got my night SEM connection, and I'm going to double click to see what I already have access to. So I already have access to datasets that have been made public by the user that created them. You can see I've got a lot of stuff from GIS admin, which is currently me, and some stuff from Water. So I want to create a new feature dataset to load my information into. To do that, I right-click on the database connection and go to New, Feature Dataset, and the first thing it wants is a name. So I'm going to call this Cemetery, because this is where all my cemetery data is going to go. My plots and my blocks, my sprinkler lines, rights of way, things like that are going to go in here. So I'm going to click Next, and the next thing it wants to know is the coordinate system. So here you have a few options, and I'll explain the benefits of each of them. NAD27 is the coordinate system that we use prolifically throughout the city, and there's no harm in doing that. The best way to search for that is to type the following number, 32043, and you can either hit Enter or click the little search button, and it'll highlight NAD27. If you want to be able to easily access that in the future, go up here to the yellow star and click Add to Favorites, and this Favorites folder will be populated with that thing that you clicked. Another popular coordinate system with Utah State in general is NAD83, and here's its unique ID, 3566. I'm going to hit Enter. NAD83 state plane using US feet is something that Utah State, Utah County, and many other nearby municipalities use. I can also add that to favorites and use that as my coordinate system. Lastly, there are recommendations that I've seen online if you're going to have your data on the web to use the Web Mercator transformation, or sorry, coordinate system. So to find that, I can just type Web Mercator, click Search. It's here, it's WGS 1984, and I can also see down here that its unique ID is 3857, so I could have searched for that, but I'm going to add it to favorites. So now I'm going to clear the search so that I can see all the coordinate systems, and for this instance I'm going to use NAD27. Like I said, there's not a right or wrong about that, so let's just go with that. I'm not going to use a vertical coordinate system because elevation in these data sets isn't going to matter for the time being. I'm going to take all the defaults for tolerance and click Finish. So because I'm the owner as username SEM, I immediately have access, visible access to this this new data set. And notice that the name of this data set is so clean, right? Orem EGDB, that stands for Enterprise Geodatabase, followed by the owner of the data set, SEM, followed by the name I gave it. Now contrast that with the names on Soldier, where you have Orem GIS, which is fine, dot, double quote, Orem backslash, I mean having backslash in the name is awkward enough, the username, double quote, period, and then the data set's name. So I really like Night for that purpose as well. Alright, time to load some data. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to load data into your new data set, and they've all got their advantages and disadvantages. And I'm going to be loading the same data set each time. So the first thing I'm going to migrate is the cemetery plots. So on Soldier, that's known as Orem GIS, Orem Liam 2223 Cemetery, because Liam, my coworker, is who created that. I'm going to right-click and copy that, and I'm going to go into Cemetery, right-click, and paste it. Okay, the spatial references do not match, so that's a problem. Now, this cemetery is in NAD27, so you may wonder why the issue. If I look in here, I can see that the WIC ID is 32043, and if I look in my data set in its properties in the XY coordinate system tab, I can also see that the WIC ID is 32043. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that at version, I think it was 10.5, the definition for NAD27 changed. I'm not sure which number it is in here amongst so many, but there was a slight change, and that slight change is enough to say that the coordinate systems don't match. So copying and pasting isn't available for me at this time, but that's okay. Another way is to export your data set. So I'm going to right click on Cemetery and go to Export to Geodatabase Multiple. So that's going to run an arctoolbox command. You'll notice that it says feature class to geodatabase. I also want to move the blocks. And now it wants to know where I want to put them, so I'm going to click on the folder and then look in Database Connections, Night Sem, and then I single click Cemetery and click Add, and now it knows where they're supposed to go. So I'm going to click OK. I know that work is being done. If you ever want to see the progress on your tools, you can go to Geoprocessing. This menu does take a while to open. Results, and I can expand current session, and you can see an hourglass near feature class to geodatabase. That means that it's currently working. I have access to ArcCatalog to do other things if I wanted to do so. Okay, so the tool has completed. I get a success error message down here. It's a success because of the green check mark, and then I can also see up here the little script icon. If there had been a problem, I think it turns into a yellow yield sign. So now I'm going to scroll up to the Cemetery dataset and look inside of it, and I have SemBlocks and Cemetery 1. The reason that this got renamed to Cemetery 1, it's a little difficult to explain, and it's not really that important, but this original dataset was named Cemetery, but that's also the name of the feature dataset, so it underscored it with a 1. Although feature datasets look and act like folders, they're really not. It's just a convention that ArcGIS uses. So I don't really want these datasets because I want to show you other ways to migrate data tonight. Okay, so I've previously showed a copy and paste, which didn't work because of the coordinate system, and I showed you an export. Now I'm going to show you an import. So I'm going to right click, import feature class multiple, and I'm going to drag in Cemetery blocks and Cemetery, and notice that it has this all filled out for me because I had right clicked that dataset. If I click OK, the same thing is going to happen. I'm going to get a little hourglass up here. How do I know the same thing is going to happen? Well, this is the exact same tool, feature class to geodatabase multiple. So if I clicked OK, we'd wait a while, and then those data sets would be imported, and that would be that. Here's another way. In fact, I think I'm going to show you 4 ways, not 3. I'm going to right click on this and do export to geodatabase single, and I get a different dialog. So it wants to know where output location is, so I'm going to scroll up to night. I'm going to drag Cemetery there, and then it wants me to name the output feature class. See, before it just assumed the name was going to be the same, but now I could change it. You know, I could say it's plots now. If I go down here, I've got a list of fields. If I were to import shape length and shape area, these are automatic fields that are in every geodatabase. If I were to import those, I believe there would be 2 copies. Can I delete them? It doesn't appear that I can. Oh, now I can. Okay, so I don't delete the child item, I have to delete the parent item. Okay. If you're importing lines or polygons, I would recommend getting rid of those geometric columns. Okay, Another thing that I want to do, that I've always wanted to do, is that I want the name of the plot to be the first text field, so that when someone identifies that plot, it shows up in the identify dialog. And if people want to label by cemetery plot, it'll assume the first text field. So I think I can move these up. Yes, I highlight it and then move it up. Second of importance to me is the section, because that's a very large area. It's a letter, followed by the block, followed by the lot, but I also want sequence number up there. So I'm going to highlight it and click those up buttons so that sequence number is right under lot. Status, I think I want that at the end. And then I do want the owner before the interred name and then the monument status. So this is kind of cool, right? I can rearrange the fields in the new database, but I can only do that when I'm importing one feature class at a time. Now, if by some weird circumstance I wanted to limit which features got imported, I could create an SQL expression and only those features would be imported. But I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And while that's working, I also want to say that this feature class was related to a domain, and the domain was called cemetery status, and it meant that a single letter would spell out a word such as closed or owing or available. When I import the feature class, that domain is also imported into the target geodatabase. So that's kind of cool. Okay, I've got my success message, and my results window actually shows a tool this time because it was not a script. I was just importing one, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the new plots feature class. I love that, orem.egdb.sem.plots. So clean. I'm going to go into preview. There's my my feature class. I'm going to go into table. And you can see that the plot is now first, followed by section, block, lot, sequence, number, etc. Okay. I guess a fourth way to import data from anywhere into Night is to just run the tool itself from Arc toolbox. So I believe that is in Conversion Tools under To Geodatabase, Feature Class to Feature Class. And you should recognize this dialog. It's what I got when I imported one data set. I'm going to go and drag blocks as the input features. I'm going to drag and drop the cemetery feature dataset as the output location. I'm going to rename the output feature class as blocks, and I do prefer that all datasets and feature classes be all capital letters. If I go down here and highlight shape st length, I'm going to delete those fields because the new geodatabase is going to recreate them anyway. I'm going to move section up, followed by block, followed by plot count. And if I wanted, I could rename the fields here too, but that does have repercussions to any maps pointing to this data. Okay, so what we've seen so far is moving from one geodatabase to another, from Soldier to Night, but now we're going to import one or two shapefiles. The process is pretty much the same. My shapefiles are local on my hard drive, and that's dangerous, right? Because we don't want local data to be lost in the case of a damaged machine or no backups. Now, truth be told, this is all out on PW4 server as well, but we're just playing pretend. So I'm going to right-click on Cemetery Sprinklers, and I'm going to export that to a geodatabase. The output location, I could search for it with the Browse folder, but I've already got it open here on the left, so dragging and dropping is just so easy. For the output feature class, I don't want to call it Cemetery Sprinklers because Cemetery is now redundant, so I'm going to call them Sprinkler Lines, all capital letters. Sprinkler Lines with an underscore to show that it's a different word. And this ordering of fields is just fine. Section followed by status. Note, there are no geometry fields for the length of the line, and that's because it's coming from a shapefile. Shapefiles don't maintain that information as an attribute. Okay. You know, I just came up with a fifth way to get stuff into Night. If you decided to use a different coordinate system, such as NAD83 or Web Mercator, for your feature data set, then you probably would need to do it's called transformation. Okay, that's in Data Management Tools under Projections and Transformations, and it's called Project. I know it looks like the word project, but it's pronounced project because you're projecting from one coordinate system to another. I'll go ahead and open the tool, but I won't run it. So you put in your input data set, your output data set, the output coordinate system, and you're going to choose, which one you want it to convert it to. If you're doing a geographic transformation, this is really important if you're going from NAD27 to NAD83, because the transformation that you want to use ends with the word NADCON, and it means Continental United States. If you don't put anything there, I think things get thrown off quite a few feet. So you want the NADCON transformation. I don't know as much about converting to Web Mercator, so I apologize that I'm not prepared for that. Okay, so I've got my blocks, plots, and sprinkler lines in a new feature data set, so what's next? The next thing I'm going to do is right click and go into Manage, and I'm going to manage privileges. Right now, a machine username called SDE has select privileges, but I want to add that and make this information public to all city employees. So I click the Add button, and I click on the public role, and I click OK. And now everyone that signs in to Night is going to at least be able to see the data. Now if I had another username that also had permissions to edit it, I would check these other boxes, Insert, Update, and Delete. In fact, if I check one of them, I think the other three get checked as well. They don't. So maybe that's a feature in Soldier, not Night. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, and those permissions are now granted. And then the last thing is that I want to be able to edit the data sets, right? If I were to try and edit this stuff from ArcMap right now, it would say that there's no version data to edit. So I need to right click it, go to Manage, and then into Register as Versioned, and it would do that. Now you do need to do that if you're going to be editing online or if you're going to be editing from your desktop. So now that our data is migrated from Soldier to Night and from a shapefile to Night, the next thing that we need to modify are all of the map documents on our hard drive that reference the old data. Now, there are a few ways to do that, and I'm going to show you some of those ways right now. So I have a folder called Scripting, and it contains 7 map documents that I copied from the parent folder. So if we go into section A right here, we can right click it, set data sources, and do it manually. So for cemetery sprinklers, we can click on this ellipses, and we can choose the sprinkler lines data set or feature class. For boundaries, we haven't migrated that yet, so we'll leave that alone. In section A, it's a little unclear what this used to point to because all you can see is an SDE file, but what it was referring to is the plots. So I'll click the ellipses, plots, add, and see it wants to save the file somewhere else. It does not want to overwrite the file we already have. So I'm going to click OK. Here's my copy of section A. I'll double click to open it. and the map looks good. Let's check its data sources. If I click on List by Source, I can see that my layers from SDE are coming from Orem, EGDB, SEM, Cemetery, and the files underneath that are sprinklers and Section A, while the boundaries layer is still coming from PW4 server. So that's great. That's exactly what I want. Alternatively, I could double click one of these layers, go into its source tab, and I can see that it's coming from Orem EGDB, which is night. Okay. Another way to modify layers is by going into the map document. So I'm going to go into section B this time. And I'm going to right click on a layer, and if the data set was broken, meaning this layer couldn't find its source, then this repair data source option would be available. What's nice about repair data source is that if you have multiple layers in your map that used to be in the same place but are now gone, when you use repair data source, it'll fix the data source for as many layers as it can. So I'm going to go into section B by double clicking the layer name and going into its properties. I can see that it's still connected to Soldier, right, because it's connected to the Orem GIS database. I'm going to set the data source to plots, add it, click OK, and now it's pointing to the new location. If I click over here on List by Source, I can see that section B is coming from the Cemetery feature dataset on Orem SQL, while sprinklers and boundaries are still coming from the Cemetery folder out on PW4 server. Now these two options are great if you only have a few maps that you work with, but there are some of you that work with quite a few maps. In fact, you can see that I've got loads of maps dealing with cemeteries in my cemetery folder. But for purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to work with the 7 that I have here in the scripting folder. So here's what you'll do if you have a similar situation. First of all, I'm going to open the Python window by clicking this button up here. I'm going to make it large because I want to be able to see a lot of stuff at once. I'm going to right click the window and click Load, and I'm going to go out to the Arc Scripts folder under ArcGIS in Dataproc Apps. So hopefully you can see that path here, and the script that I'm referring to is called Move to Night, and I want to open it. Once it opens, Arc Catalog is waiting for me to confirm everything, so it wants me to press Enter, and that gives me my cursor, which is 3 chevrons pointing to the right. Alright, so what do we need to do? The first thing we need to do is create a variable that is an empty find and replace. So I'm going to call it F and R for find and replace equals new find and replace. And you can see that Python is helping me down there with Insight. After I type the name of the method, I have to put a left and a right parenthesis to call the method. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is we need to add a find and replace. So add find and replace. All I had to do was press Enter once it suggested it. Left parenthesis. And over here in the help, you can see what it wants first. Find and replace. Okay, I'm going to pass in my find and replace variable. Notice that there's Insight for that as well. Comma. What is it that I'm replacing? So I'm going to go down to my database connections, and I'm going to find that cemetery dataset, and I'm going to drag it, click and drag down to the window, and it puts the name there for me, so I don't have to type it. Comma, because now it needs the new feature class, and that is going to be plots, so I'm dragging and dropping it. And then I'm going to end the call to the function with a right parenthesis and press Enter. Good. Now I need to do the same thing for the blocks. Cemetery blocks. Oh, I have to put F and R, comma at the end here. I'm going to go find the blocks and drag that down to the window. Add, find, and replace, F and R. And then the next thing is the cemetery sprinklers, which are, there is a file out on PW4 server, but it actually doesn't matter where the shapefile comes from. It'll replace all instances that refer to any cemetery sprinkler shapefile with the sprinkler lines feature class. Okay, so I think I'm set. Now I need to call the big method. I'm going to show you how to do one map at a time as well, just for testing, and this is good. So we've already changed section A. I think I tried to change section B, but I decided to close without saving, so that's a good candidate. So it's called migrate map tonight. Left parenthesis. It wants the MXD path. So I'm going to drag and drop section B down to the window, comma. It wants my night connection. So I'm going to go to database connections and drag and drop night sem down there. And it wants find and replace, and that is F and R. Right parenthesis. I'm going to press enter, and you can see some output. It did a layer replacement twice, once on sprinklers and once on a layer called section B. So let's open that map up and see if it did what it was supposed to do. Okay, I'm going to go to list by source, and great, I can see that sprinklers and section B are coming from the cemetery feature data set. Now there's one thing I want to say about this map that may apply to your map as well, and that is that the cemetery sprinklers layer in this map has a filter on it called a definition query. I am filtering out the sprinkler lines that belong in other sections. Now I can't see them, so that means it is working, but I do want to apply a small fix. I debated whether or not to make this automatic, but my thinking was that there weren't a lot of definition queries in a lot of maps. And if something is wrong, you'll see a drawing error down here in the right hand corner of the map. So if I go into Query Builder and I wipe that out, if I double click section now, there's no double quotes around it. So it must be working, but I can clean it up by taking out the double quotes, clicking OK, and I can save the map document. Close. Now I've still got a few other maps in this folder that need to be converted, so I'm going to use another method that's very similar to the one that I just called. Instead of migrate map tonight, I'm going to just call it migrate maps tonight. That's plural. So I'm going to copy that and paste it. I could have just pressed the up arrow as well. And I'm going to say migrate maps tonight, and what it wants is a path to not one map document, but to a whole folder of map documents. It's going to convert every map in that folder and subfolders to use night. So let's try it out. Alright, there's the Edit Cemetery Map document. I want you to know while this is running that if it finds a map document in which there's nothing to change, it does not resave it, so it will not give it a new date. Section B, for instance, we had already converted that, so there was nothing for it to convert. Okay, let's open section C, which we had not done manually. Okay, a quick check over by list by source reveals that it's coming from the feature dataset. Amazing and great. So now it's up to you. You are the owners of your datasets, and we rely on you to move and migrate them and provide us with information and notifications of when you're doing so. This same process is going to be the same when you're republishing your data to the web. All of your data that's on the web came from a map document, so by replacing the paths in a map document, testing it, and republishing, your web services will then point to night. I've given ArcGIS Server the permissions that it needs to see the night database, and when it connects, it'll be connecting with the username that you used in your map document. So that's my tutorial for today. I hope that we can get data migrated off of Soldier within the next couple years and on tonight, and I will probably be upgrading that to the latest version of its geodatabase in late 2018. So thanks for watching and happy GISing.